Hi everyone, this is the sewing workshop and I've had a request to show how to do binding, because although there are loads of videos out there, they don't really show you how to do the curves. That is what's very difficult to do, even if you can sew quite well. In my box, I've just shown you this, we've got this lovely ready-made bit of binding. This is not suitable to go around a curve because it will not bend. So if you buy something like this, then you cannot use it on a curve. Let me just take these out. Then you can buy this sort of thing here. I've ironed it out because I've used it for something else, but it comes like this. The wider this stuff is, the harder it is to sew with it. The same goes for the stuff you can get in satin. I've got it here again. You can't even stretch it a lot, and the key to a really good bound armhole or neckline is that you can stretch it. When you make your own binding, can you see the difference? That is how much stretch I get. Hardly any here, hardly any there. When I used to be in industry and I made all sorts of bridal dresses, etc., I always make them myself, and you can see beautiful, you get lots of stretch. So I'm using 3 centimeter strips to make all my binding, but you might want to use 4, especially if you want this look where it rolls out one side and comes back on the other. So let's see how we cut this out. I've got a piece of remnant fabric here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a straight line that could be across or down, it doesn't really matter, and I fold it over as long as it's a 90-degree angle. Excuse me, actually I've got more fabric this way, like that. Fold it over so you have a 90-degree angle and you can get the most out of it, like that. And then all you have to do is glide your scissor in there and cut through to the other side. So now I've got quite a bit here, and I am going to just fold this over a number of times until I get sort of right amount there. Put on a weight, take your tape measure, or you can draw pencil lines, that's okay as well. And I'm going to go for 4, so I'm going to cut myself a few 4 centimeter wide strips. That is 1.5 inches. And here are the 3 options I'm going to show you this morning. We have got the traditional option here where we have got our bias binding, and we've ironed it from the side to the middle and then over. So I'm going to show you this, but the important part is make your own so you've got lots of stretch. And then the next one is the version where you have your bias binding just as a strip which is ironed over lengthways, and then it's attached from the inside and rolled to the outside. Now this is very professional looking, but it does take a bit of practice, and I would say if you mastered that, this certainly you can see it looks a little bit nice already. It looks much more structural because you're using this material to fold over, and it's much thicker obviously than this, but that's easier. This is harder. And then for anyone that doesn't want your binding to show but wants a really nice little armhole like that, we are using the bias again that is like that, and it's attached to the outside and rolls to the inside and is top stitched, and it's also under stitched here. So we're going to look at these 3 methods now, and I'm hoping you learned something. I've cut myself some fabric here, so if I wanted to put the binding on so it looks like the board binding, which goes around like this, okay, which would be really difficult to do, you can see here how hard that is to get it around a curve, then I need to reduce this area here by 1 centimeter because the seam allowance is gone, isn't it? So if you want to do that, you need to cut this off. Okay, so we're going to do this first. I'm not going to do it on my pattern, but I am going to just lop off 1 centimeter before I even start sewing on either side. And now we're going to make it look like the board stuff, but of course it's going to sit a lot better. And the first thing now is for me to close the shoulder seams, and then we're going to put our binding on. I've got the old-fashioned method here, and I want to show you that as well, of course, but it's with my homemade one. So iron in half, iron towards the middle. Now I'm going to sew that on the inside again, and that is the important part here. You do have to do that. So I'm going to pull this, and I'm going to hold this straight, and I'm going to sew right in that groove there, and I'm really going to pull it. Okay, otherwise you're going to get this huge armhole. And then as it straightens out, of course you don't need to pull it that much anymore. You don't want to hold in a straight line because that'll look puckered when it's ironed, so you don't want that either. So you can do that. Okay, now I'm coming into my curve. I'm going to pull this again a bit more, yeah? So all the way around. There you go. Ooh. And secure the thread. There we go. Done. Now I've got this in, you can see I'm already holding this in here, and I've missed it there. This is because I'm actually doing this sitting right on the left of the machine. I can't really see what I'm doing. So I'm going to have to go over this when I can actually see what I'm doing. But you want to stitch right in your groove. And then we're going to just turn this to the outside. And we're going to put it down. And we're going to stitch it down. Actually, I'm not going to re-sew that because it works like this as well. I've ironed this really well, but it's very hard to do when you're not sitting in front of it. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch right on the edge, this time on the outside. Look like that. And I think for all you real beginners, this is probably the easiest way to do it. The only thing that is not so great about this method is that, of course, it's then done, and you obviously, when you close your side seam, you'll not have such a beautiful finish there. So you can, of course, close the side seam first and then do all of this. It's just you're doing small children's clothing possibly, and that's really hard to get into. So if you were making this for grown up, I would close the shoulder seam first because you've got plenty of space to go around all this. Okay, and just cover that stitching line, that's important. Just guide this all the way around and done. And this will look 100 times better than your bought tape. There you go. Beautiful. That's what you want it to look like, really. And then you just close it and overlock it. And like I said, for a grown-up, definitely would close the side seam first. For children's wear, oh, it's much too tight to get in, especially if you have an overlocker. If you just overlock this, you can then tidy it away, and that's fine too. So just an overlock there, and we've got a beautiful seam. Or alternatively, look, you overlock either side, you can do that as well, and then just stitch this in, and I think that makes life a lot easier. I've done my armhole here, as you can see, and now I'm taking my bias binding and I'm going on the inside. So this is the back of my dress, and here is my armhole. Facing the outside, and then you're going on the inside with this technique, and you want to start on the underarm. So what you want to do is place your binding on there, just so it goes slightly over the seam. And now we're going to secure it and we're going to sew it on. And when I'm sewing my binding on, especially where you have a curve, I am stretching it. I'm really giving this all I got. I always line it up here. If you're not comfortable with that, then you maybe want to cut it a bit wider. So I'm going to really pull it, and then I'm going to put it on, and I line it up with the inner plastic here of my machine. I think you find your own one. What you never ever want to do is stretch this part. When it gets to where your fabric is straight and you come out of the curve for the underarm, you can actually let go a bit. You just have a tiny little bit of tautness there, and you go all the way around. So, all right. There we go. This is the easy bit. If you're doing this for an adult, of course it's heaps easier because you don't have such a tiny armhole. So now I'm coming to my curve again. So, and I'm going to pull my homemade binding to Kingdom Come. You want it to be really taut. What you never want to do is stretch the lower part, which is the cardinal sin, and which is what always happens when people do this. Okay, so now, done that. I'm going to just go over here. You can fold this in as well, like that, little triangle, so that it looks nice and neat when it's together. And I'm just going to overlap this, like that. Nice little pull on it. And then I can just cut my binding off. I've overlapped it quite a bit here. There is no need to do that really. So I'm going to cut this back a bit, because you won't be able to roll it around it at all if you do it like this. Just a little bit. No frays and stuff, that's important. Okay. So now it's nicely cut back, and this will now sit to the outside like that. Okay, easy? Not really. So what we're going to do now is turn this, so we again work from the inside. So what you're going to do is turn it so the right side is now on the inside, and you just fold over this bias binding and we're stitching it down. And I would start the lower bit here. You need to fold this in a little bit. In fact, I could just cut off this corner here because it wants to peep out, and it, you know, that's a bit annoying. That's the hardest bit here, this area, and I would recommend that you take a pin and move that in like that, so you know that can't go anywhere. And this is truly is the hardest bit of the thing, and it looks really nice when you're done. Okay, now let's have a look here at this. I'm not going to pin all the way around. I'd only pin where absolutely necessary. Okay, so if you wanted this to be a bit wider, you could just do it 5 centimeters. Maybe 4 is even a little small for this. I always do it with 4, and then I also work with 3 centimeters. So, but that's really when you've done it 30 years kind of thing. So, okay. So now I can start sewing. I wouldn't start sewing directly on it. I'd start slightly above it, and I would make sure that that would, if this was my dress, that that was my back. Okay, so I'm going to start here, just over, because it's very hard to start on a bit which is really thick. Okay, so I'm going to go in now. And believe me, when I haven't got a camera there, it's actually easier. So I'm going to stitch this in back and forwards. Make sure my hands are not in the way so you can actually see it. So there we go. I'm going right next to the edge here. I tuck in and I just pull it over with my hands, hold it with my finger. Oops, also good idea is to have the needle down position, and I'm going all the way around. And like everything, this will take you quite a bit of practice, but boy does it totally come out better than the stuff you buy from the shop. That ready-made bias binding really isn't good for dressmaking unless it's a straight line, or you got a very high quality soft one that has stretch in it. You can check that in the shop. If you're lucky enough to find one, then you can use it, of course. I found one once. It was red. It was beautiful. It was like a really soft cotton. Okay. Also, what makes it easier if you don't use like a linen, I'm using a linen here. If you used a very soft fabric and starched it before you cut it into bias binding, that also makes a heck of a lot of a difference. There we go. Right, and I'm all the way around. So again, I can put my back on, line it up with that line, centimeter over, run this along, and fold it back, and voila, a centimeter. Now I'm going to show you the method that is used by a lot of industrial sewing because it's really fast, really quick. You move it over, this time just go foot width. Yeah, so that is also almost a bit too wide, but you want to put it on foot width now. You pull as you go around, you keep this straight here, move it in like that, look, easy. This is the method I would recommend for anybody that is a beginner sewer because you have much more control over what you're doing. And I'm coming round and I'm stretching it again quite a bit. Okay, there we go, and it's on. So now the next step is the understitching. I'm going to understitch this because I want this to roll down there. Before I do it, I'm going to cut this back. Don't cut it back too drastically because you're still understitching, and if you cut back too much you have nothing to understitch. Right, understitching means that I'm going to stitch whatever I want to go to the other side onto what is my facing effectively. This works like a facing now, so I'm going to do that and understitch it. So I'm going to do a stitch on top. Close to the edge, making sure my seam allowance stays right facing that way, okay? This is a great way for a beginner to practice getting these armholes right, and you will get it right. Okay. Done. I've gone all the way around. Before I now flip this in, I'm going to close my side seam, similar to what I've just done before, but with small little armholes I would always do it flat first. It's so much quicker and less hassle. Done that. So just imagine that this is overlocked now, or overlocked either side, or however you're working. I'm going to go and open out my seam here because that's easier, and turn it in, right, like that. So now turn it all, just go out so you maybe can see it better. There we go. Turn it all, so we're again working, now we've got the right to the outside and we have it here, and we are going to just stitch around. And this time I line up again with my presser foot. You can, I think that would be good, or just next to it maybe, you definitely catch it. And now you can see here you've got all this stuff that you need to hold in. So now you disperse that nicely, and once you've done that, you just look at your guide as to where you decided it was going to go, and then you go over. It definitely will catch, it definitely won't roll out. All you have to do is go along. Don't let this push up, just hold it in. I would cut myself a few practice examples of this and do it, and you'll be surprised how quickly you get the hang of this. There we go. Keep it the same. Keep it the same. On the front facing, if you put your facing on now, don't remember that I've cut some off, yeah, so I need to move over a bit by 1 centimeter. I'm going to do it from this side here, okay, and I'm going to check whether my seam allowance, it's there, so I've got 1 centimeter here, and I'm going to check here as well, and if I roll this out, that's exactly 1 centimeter, so I know that this here is exactly right, okay, so check your work, and when you get it right, then go on and make your proper dress.